Well, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. The reality of NATO as a perpetually expanding alliance must be prevented. Now, that blunt assessment from the U.S. national security strategy has sparked concern across Europe, particularly among Central and Eastern European allies. With Washington urging nations to take greater responsibility for their own defense and signaling limits to NATO enlargement, questions loom over regional security and transatlantic cohesion. Now, joining us to break it all down and what the implications are for NATO and Poland is Robert Pszczel, Senior Fellow, Center for Eastern Studies. Good to have you back on TVP World. I want to jump in right into this line. There are several lines from this document which are concerning, but particularly with NATO. The way we read this, is this an existential crisis for how we perceive NATO?
I think it is perhaps the most severe, the most testing situation for NATO for decades at least. Why? Because what this document does, it's not a good document. I mean, it's badly written. It's at times incoherent. It's ideological. It's contradictory. But it does reflect what, at least to a large part, as much as one can ascertain, the people in Washington, including, he has signed himself beginning, President Trump, think. And the problem is that this, whichever way one wants to describe it, but the document clearly spells out the direction the US wants to take. And from NATO's point of view, there is no kind of ambiguity. US wants to basically play a much smaller role in NATO. And that is a huge problem because, of course, NATO has, if you like, enjoyed, even though, you know, allies kind of have disputes, but still, it has been working on functioning and very successfully with US as a leader. So now this leader essentially says, well, you guys have to take over most of the tasks, and also couches this in the terms which are frankly rather even insulting for the Europeans, because the bulk of there is by the way, there is nothing about the adversaries. There's nothing about real the countries that are competitors and adversaries, even enemies of NATO and United States. Whereas there is a lot of language about the European allies. And some hints about, I guess, Canada and Australia, which are, normally reserved for the countries you consider your adversary. So it's, as I say, this is not good news for NATO. And it does signify that something, of course, the shift of a paradigm, if you like, that is happening. Some of the signs have been there. That's not the issue. I mean, one would have to be blind not to see it. But yet, this document, it does not help. It's not very clear how it does want to forward U.S. interests, because, as I say, it's it mixes up various things which do not together make a coherent whole.
Mm-hmm. Now, Robert, you mentioned ideology in all this. I mean, this is one of the things that sticks out in one of the sections as well, and I want to get your view on it. There's this idea to cultivate, in the document says, healthy nations in Europe. So that does hint at a sort of ideological preference. You see that the U.S. is going to be linking security support with those nations that it politically aligns with. You think that's something that we're going to be seeing in the future?
Well, it cannot be ruled out, because this is the direction. This is the way President Trump behaves. This has got nothing to do with NATO. But as an example, I mean, pardoning of the former Honduras president, who was accused and basically he was, there was a special, if you like, investigative operation by the U.S. Authorities of serious drug offenses, and President Trump pardons him while at the same time is almost ready, or says he's ready to start de facto war against Venezuela precisely because of the drugs charges. So one wonders what this is about, if it's not about some kind of political preferences. We've seen the way President Trump relates to Viktor Orban. And of course, as some people have observed, I think quite rightly, the tenor of this security, after all, strategy document it reflects to a very large extent in those, if you like, ideological or political parts, which have not really normally that much to do with hard security interests, with the speech that Vice President Vance made in Munich. Remember, when he basically berated Europe for various things which are, frankly, some of them may be a problem, but these are internal European issues. And that's, by the way, another example of the contradiction. It simply does not add up. When you say, well, we stand on the side of freedom, we don't want censorship, we just want everybody to decide what they want, and that is the message to the dictators. We will not really have a problem with whatever regime you're running, and that's a message to, Russia, China, countries in the Middle East. And then, as far as Europeans are concerned, suddenly there's a lot of value judgments. A lot of them could be questioned, some but it's not an academic discussion, which comes from the US. So this is, yes, it is highly ideological and a convoluted one for that,
Mm-hmm. Also, I want to get your view on back to what was said in the document, very much essentially closing the door to the open door policy that NATO has had for a number of years. So is this essentially now gone? Is this temporary? How does this practically impact the alliance? I mean, we know that this is going to be bad news for Ukraine, but generally, what does that mean generally for the alliance, that this open door policy seems to be now shut by this document?
Well, again, it's not clear why, first of all, this passage is even there. That's the first thing, because, there is a difference between an issue of principle and a political position taken at a given time in a specific situation in terms of assessing a specific application, right? So you mentioned there's one more thing which stands so blatantly from this formulation. It's actually the formulation, NATO shall not expand. That's the language which we know very well. I've dealt with this for years, which is the language of Russian propaganda. NATO, we have consciously, including US, did not use the term expand because that suggests it's some kind of a automatic process decided secretly somewhere. No, we use the term enlarge because, NATO has enlarged because of the wish of the people who wanted to join it. That was the story of, our country, Poland, but also many others. And to suddenly start talking about expanding, this is basically adopting Russian propaganda, which is really strange. But apart from Ukraine that you rightly mentioned, we know what the situation is. There is no consensus, and US has kind of, changed its position from what it was some years ago. Okay, that happens. But there are also other countries, for instance, in the Balkans, which by this sort of blunt, blanket statement almost may feel so we should not even apply. And it raises questions about Article 10, which is still there in the Washington Treaty, the so-called Washington Treaty signed in 1949, which established NATO, which says that every European country, etc., who shares the goals and values of the convention has the right to apply. So this is, it's another example of inconsistency, of sort of being very cavalier about the fundamentals to which, United States is still signed on to. It's just that this administration doesn't seem to really treat this seriously. And that reflects on the whole relation with the allies, which for me is the most serious problem with this document, because it just, again, it does not add up. US claims in this document partnership and alliances and allies are a big asset for it globally. And then it basically, the document undermines this very alliances, particularly in Europe, although the language concerning Indo-Pacific is also really somewhat dubious, because it just asks various things from the allies, but does not say what are the U.S. responsibilities, and that is quite serious and unfortunately not totally surprising, bearing in mind the way that the administration is kind of behaving when it comes to specific issues, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's others. That's unfortunately, this inconsistency is a sort of trademark, and that's bad news for the alliances, good news for the real adversaries of the United States and our countries.
Also, on all of this, I mean, looking at, as you said, it's a convoluted document, many inconsistencies to try and wade through it. But what about Poland's role in all this? Because in some cases, you know, if we read some of this wording, there seems to be a kind of, let's say, preferred direction towards countries that have, let's say, a better relationship with the United States, a transactional relationship. As we know, that security relationship with the United States is quite a strong one with Poland. In a way, I'm just curious to get your view. If there's no enlargement of NATO, if there's more emphasis on the allies now, can Poland step out of all of this in a stronger position in some sort of bilateral way? Is Poland ready to do something like that? Do you see other mechanisms, if it's not NATO, but within NATO, that can be strengthened? We've seen more cooperation with the Nordics, for instance, in Poland.
Well, that's a very serious question, extremely, I mean, strategic, if you like, and would require perhaps, to give it justice, you know, a much longer sort of almost speech analysis. But a couple of points. First of all, I do not share the view, and for instance, I've seen it reflected even in some documents, you know, coming from some state institutions, that this is like a document which creates great opportunities and maybe it could even be used to our benefit. I doubt it. I mean, of course, every situation creates opportunities, there's no doubt, but there's also no doubt in my mind, you know, it's simple. We have based our security foundation, you know, our insurance policy when it comes to security on NATO, and the US is an absolutely fundamental element of that. So if there are doubts, if this paradigm is shifting, not in a sort of natural way, because, you know, there are some things which, in a way, it's true that this document may inadvertently or advertently help to achieve, which is to force people to do more in Europe, to put it bluntly, you know, to spend more money, to become more kind of able to rely on one's own capacities, generate those capacities. Yes, that's the good news, but it does not change the fact that, you know, security abhors a vacuum. And we cannot just live in this world in which we make various assumptions, which then our closest ally basically undermines at the stroke of the pen, you know. And this is an issue. There's nothing internal in life, in the world, and one should always think about possible alternatives. But right now, I think the key priority is to continue trying to basically save this transatlantic link, because it's not buried. Let's not bury it. That's my message.
Right, so
but in view of everything that's happening,
I got to jump in. I'm sorry. On that message, I said, let's not bury it, but let's stay optimistic. I mean, it's a document that's going to be analyzed by many, I think.
Yes, stay optimistic, but also draw some lessons which are obvious from this.
Yeah. So, but look, really insightful things there as always. Rabbi Pszczel, really appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks here on TVP World. But stay tuned for more news and commentary. Goodbye.